Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1652. The topic is training, and the title is Training Split Review Muscle Growth. So this is a training split that a client sent to me. Now, the client is a personal trainer, and we kind of just do consultation type stuff back and forth. So I help them with nutrition and training advice, and it's just fun to kind of shoot the breeze and talk back and forth with ideas. So we're working on getting leaner for the summer, but they also want to get bigger everywhere. So the idea is to be as big as possible, as lean as possible, and look like that all year round. Who doesn't want that, you know? So great idea. Great goal. And then what they sent was basically the plan that they have for how to split up their body parts throughout the week. So the term, like a training split, it refers to the schedule and what body parts you're going to train on what days. And what we're working through is actually talking about the number of working sets per day, per muscle group, per week. So a little bit of background knowledge that'll help better understand today's podcast is going to be podcast 1437. It's a training podcast titled Programming for Greatest Muscle Growth. We talk about how often you should train muscles, how many sets per week, how many reps, depending on what the muscle is, what the exercise is, what the goals are. There's a lot of really good information in that one. Basically tells you everything that you need to pay attention to when you're writing programming for muscle growth. Then, podcast 1466 is a training podcast titled Growth Pattern of Muscles. It's actually helpful to know kind of what muscles tend to grow first and the ways in which they tend to grow. So, for example, the back tends to grow wide before it grows thick and dense. Now, to every time you'd say, muscles tend to do this, somebody's going to say, well, I see this, So, yeah, there's occasional opposites, there's occasional outliers. But overwhelmingly, there are very common trends when it comes to how muscles grow. And our muscles don't grow evenly. We have some muscles that will grow faster and easier with lower number of sets per week than other muscles. Some muscles are very stubborn. Some muscles grow really well. So, for example, I don't do anything directly for my traps because they tend to grow from everything else I do. So I don't do shrugs. The traps grow well. Actually, I've had them to the point where they've almost gotten too big. When I used to do a lot of deadlifting work, they would start to almost make me appear less wide. So I would look narrower because my traps would start to get bigger compared to how wide my shoulders were. So I've had to be careful about not overdoing my traps, even though I don't directly train them. But kind of paired with that is I have to do an enormous amount of shoulder work because my shoulders just don't grow well. Now, I have a lot of shoulder injuries from when I was younger, playing football and whatnot, but that could be contributing to some of it. But I do have trouble getting my shoulders to grow, so I have to train them like crazy, but I don't train my traps at all, and they grow. So that's good and bad. But that is kind of just the story of life. That's how it goes sometimes. So some muscles are going to grow well, some aren't. So what you'll see in today's podcast is I'm going to talk through the plan that they sent me, the number of working sets that they are planning per body part. Now, so for example, I'll just give you a quick rundown. The total volume for the full week. They have 17 working sets of quadriceps, 12 working sets of hamstrings, 12 working sets of calves, 9 working sets of chest, and there's more, but I'll stop there. So what I want to allude to here is just because something has lower set count per week doesn't mean it's going to grow less. So, for example, my direct trap work is 0, but I don't have trouble getting them to grow. So, some people I've worked with, they have amazing calves. We don't ever train their calves directly, and they have great calves. Other people, you could train 20 working sets 7 days a week on their calves, and these suckers, they're so damn slow to respond. So, just because a set count is low doesn't mean that the growth of that muscle will be low. The idea is to learn what works for you individually. What muscles tend to grow well, what muscles don't, and then try to isolate them out. So one of the things that he and I already talked about was he wants his arms to grow. But in a previous program, the number of working sets of the arms was almost too high. It was like 24, I believe, working sets per week on each body part. And it's like, oof, that's a little bit much. And that can actually contribute to them not growing. So something to remember is our muscles grow when we're not in the gym. When you're in the gym, you're exercising the muscle, you're actually damaging and creating micro tears within the muscular fibers. That's a good thing. We don't want to tear the connective tissue or cause a huge gash in the muscle, but we do want micro tears within the fibers themselves, because then our body takes our nutrients, our food, and builds back the tissue even thicker, and that's what creates muscle growth. So the muscles actually grow between the training sessions when our body takes food, repairs that tissue, and thickens it up. So it's important to know that, because if you're just in the gym beating the crap out of the muscles all the time, if you're training them 3, 4, 5 times a week, that doesn't mean they're going to grow. That can actually be prohibitive to growth, because you're always damaging them and never letting them actually get fully healed and let the body put the full tissue on before you already start tearing it down again. So there is a huge component to overtraining that can be limiting growth, especially if the person's nutrition doesn't support the amount of training they're doing. So there's a lot of nuances when it comes to kind of what's going on. But the reason why some of it seems nuanced and kind of weird and like, oh man, I didn't even know that, is because of just the recognition that when we're in the gym, we're tearing the muscle apart. The muscles actually grow when we're not in the gym. Because people don't recognize that, they sometimes overdo the training and they don't pay attention enough to the food. So, somebody's like, oh, I train 6 days a week. And I'm like, well, how's your food? Oh, I eat. I'm like, oh my God, what? Why would you put that much effort in the gym, but you don't know the exact number of grams of protein that you're having every day? So your bodies can only grow with what you eat. If you don't eat enough, there's no growth, regardless of how much you work out. Now, what's awesome is this person, they're ridiculously diligent on their food. They eat amazingly well. No worries there. But the reason why I told them about the arms was at 24 working sets per muscle group, and then you also factor in that the arms are being damaged to some degree when they train back. When you do back exercises, that damages your biceps to some degree. Anytime you do a chest press or an overhead press, that damages your triceps to some degree. So they were having 24 individualized sets for for biceps and triceps, plus all the work from the shoulder presses, chest presses, and the back exercises. It's like, oof, that might be way too much. If you're constantly in the gym and those different days are spread out. So for example, if you do, chest, shoulders on Monday, then you do back and rear delts, like rear shoulders on Tuesday, then you do arms on Wednesday, you're actually technically using your arms all 3 of those days. And is your body actually able to repair and thicken the tissue in between each of those sessions? The answer is arguably no, because the muscles from a full, legitimate, hardcore bodybuilding workout, they can take 48 hours to 72 hours to recover, sometimes even longer. So if you're training every 24 hours, you're tearing that muscle down, it's not fully recovering, and then you're tearing it even more, it's not fully recovering, then you're tearing it even more. You might be digging too deep of a hole that the body's never actually able to come out of to put on new tissue. So I do caution people to not train their upper body 3 days in a row, because that runs into that exact issue, is that you're constantly tearing the tissue, but you're not giving it time to recover. Okay, with all that said, that wasn't even something I had planned to say. So what I want to do is go through and tell you the split, the schedule that they have per body part, per day, and then we'll talk about kinds of pros and cons and my thoughts and stuff. So Monday is chest, shoulders, and calves. Tuesday is back, rear shoulders. So they're actually going to do their side shoulders, their middle delts. Delts is short for deltoids, and deltoids is a fancy word for shoulder. Now, I say them interchangeably all the time. I need to get better at just saying one thing. So shoulders, there you go. But I'll start that over again. Monday is chest, shoulders, and calves, and it's the middle shoulder. Tuesday is back, rear shoulders, and quads. Wednesday is arms and calves. Thursday is legs, but high reps. Friday, they take a rest day. Saturday is arms, back, and calves. and Sunday is heavy leg day. Now, that is the schedule. Now, what I look through is some factors that I consider. They go through and they give me the breakdown of number of sets per body part. And what we want to look at that is, I'm going to name you the body parts that they listed, and that's pretty accurate there. The only thing missing is abs. But it's a pretty good list. And what you would want to do when you list out all your body parts is you want to kind of consider, prioritize them. List what are the ones I want to grow the most, what are the ones I would like to grow, and then what are the ones I don't maybe care about as much because they either grow really easily, like traps for me, or I just don't care if they're bigger. So the reason why that's important is typically, for the most part, you should have a higher number of working sets per week for the muscles that you want to grow the most. Now, in that podcast 1437, we talk about the proper number of working sets per week per muscle group is around 10 to 20 working sets. Huge caveats, all the way through there, and that's why we made a whole podcast about it, but 10 to 20. So if we look through this person's list, the highest numbers they have are their quadriceps at 17 working sets, their triceps and biceps at 16 working sets. So ideally, if I ask them, what do you want to grow the most, they should say quads and arms, because that's where they're spending the majority of their time. Then the second kind of grouping is hamstrings at 12, calves at 12, shoulders at 12, and back at 13. So those are kind of the middle ones that they're like, okay, I do want them to grow, but they're secondary. Whereas the quads, triceps, and biceps were the primary. Then the next one down is chest at 9 working sets. And then abs aren't even on there. So abs are not a major concern for them. But that's what you would want to do, is if you look at the number of working sets per week, you would ideally want the body parts that have the highest number of working sets to be the body parts that you want to grow the most. So that is a way to ensure that what you think you're doing. So often people say, I'm training, my chest 3 times a week. Yeah, but if it's only like 4 working sets per time, that's only 12 total working sets. That's not very good. That's not a lot. So you might have trouble distinguishing between frequency and total volume. Now, for example, on the opposite end is professional bodybuilders. You might have somebody that trains their legs just once a week, but they might do 12 working sets of quads and 12 working sets of hamstrings in a single workout. So they're getting 24 working sets in a single workout because they can spend 3 hours in the gym and it's their job. So that's a lot, by the way. 24 working sets in a single workout is extremely high. But that's an example where they might only train once a week, but in order to account for the lower frequency, their volume is crazy high in that workout. So those are some things to consider. So the other things I have, like on the list here, is joints. Now, your lower back is not technically a joint. It's kind of like a group of musculature around your spine. But when we think about joints, what I think of is how often are major joints loaded. So, for example, sometimes people will, in bodybuilding world, they'll do barbell bent over rows the day before they do deadlifts. Probably not a great idea, because your lower back is going to be involved in stabilizing and bracing a barbell bent over row, just as it will in deadlift. So sometimes their lower back and core musculature can become a limiting factor for both of those movements where they're not the primary target. The primary target of bent over rows is your upper back. Primary target of deadlifts is your hamstrings and glutes. So if they have lower back pain issue, stress, fatigue, weakness, then it's limiting the primary muscle, the major focus, from getting maximally worked, then that's an issue. So you want to see, okay, how often are we loading our lower back? For the split that this person sent in, the lower back is really going to be loaded on Thursday and then Sunday. That's it. Awesome. Love it. Great setup there. Now, the other joints we want to consider are kind of the joints of the arm, which is the shoulders, elbows, and wrist. The elbows especially, people have a lot of pain in their elbows. Now, that can sometimes be from the forearm muscles being overworked from too much volume and too frequent. Or it could be from shoulder problems. Now, it can also be just from crappy technique. But If somebody doesn't have good shoulder mobility, that can actually lead to elbow pain. And if they overwork their forearm muscles, that can lead to elbow pain. So, for example, I have deadlifted 700 pounds. I've deadlifted 600 pounds with just my fingers, no thumb. I have a pretty strong grip when I want it, when I train it, and I want it to be strong. But I still used wrist straps when I train my back. And part of it is I don't want all the inflammation and involvement of the forearm muscles, and it helps to decrease your bicep involvement as well. So I use wrist straps when I train my back for growth. It's not because I don't have a strong grip, it's because I'm actually purposely trying not to use my grip strength. I want to just use my back. So paying attention to shoulder, elbow, and wrist health is extremely important, because it's stuff that, like, within a couple weeks it starts to flare up. And then by then, you've already annoyed it for a couple weeks, so it's hard to get it unannoyed. So if we look at that, if we look at the shoulders, elbows, and wrists, they are loaded and involved on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So the 3 days in a row, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm not a big fan of. People do it. I understand that. But it can be a potential issue if you don't properly blend in kind of joint-friendly movements like isolation movements, as well as your compound movements. So if somebody for biceps, for example, they do underhand grip pull-ups and heavy barbell curls, that's going to tick off your wrists. That's going to tick off your elbows. Those are both very heavy, very aggressive compound movements for the biceps. So you would want to maybe swap one of those for something a little bit like less strainful, like maybe a machine preacher curl instead of the barbell curl. That's a little bit nicer on the shoulder, elbow, and wrists. You could do concentration curls like the Arnold style or the sitting down style. That would be easier on your joints as well. So you just want to be careful of how often am I loading my shoulders, elbows, and wrists, and am I doing a lot of compound heavy movements? Maybe I need to blend in isolation movements. How will you know? Is if your elbows, shoulders, and wrists are hurting after a couple weeks. So if you get into like 3rd, 4th, 5th week of training, you're like, crap, my freaking elbow hurts all the time. Then you got to blend in more isolation movements. And by then you already have a lot of inflammation and it's a huge pain in the ass. But at least you know for the future that whatever you just did for a couple weeks was not a good idea. So you have to address the issue, get all that inflammation fixed, loosen the tight muscles, decrease the frequency, and undo it. But at least now you know that that's where the line was for you. So it's a little bit of a live and learn. Now, that's why people get coaches and programming help, because you don't want to have to live and learn too many times at your own pain. It's better to learn from somebody else's pain. That's true wisdom. But that is something you would want to consider, is how often joints are loaded. Now, another thing I look at is workload balance. How many working sets are there per workout? So often, unfortunately, what you'll see in people's programs is they might have one training day that's like 12 working sets, another one that's 24, another one that's 16, and it's kind of like all over the place. So what we look through is, if we look through this person's working sets per workout, the first workout, I'll just go through the numbers per workout. So we're looking at 19 on workout 1, 19 on workout 2, 20 on workout 3, 13 on workout 4, then you have a rest day. Then we have, let me see, I gotta move my cursor, sorry about that, 23 on the 5th day, which is the day after the rest day. And then they have 13 on the last day. Now, it's important to know that after the last day, they run right back into the next week. So they only have one day off. So they're working out 6 days in a row. So that's important to know. So if we look through the numbers, if we go through the numbers from rest day to rest day, we're looking at 23, 13, 19, 19, 20, 13. So at least it's front-loaded in the heaviest ones. And then if you notice, there was a lot of them were around 20, and then there was those 2 13 days. That's actually okay, because the 2 13 days are their legs. And legs, when you do them with compound movements and you do them with high intensity, high focus, high intentionality, you don't need a lot of working sets. So I really like that their working sets for leg days are lower, because they're just not going to be able to put in a good quality if it's much higher. And then the other days being around 20 working sets is a little high, but very manageable if they're blending in the isolation movements. So that's okay. Very good. So good workload balance. The next thing I want to talk about, the last one we'll look at component, is workout frequency. So 6 days in a row is aggressive. And they're all actually aggressive workouts. So if I were to consider what are like the ones that might have the least amount of hit on the CNS, it would be workout 3, which is like arms and calves. That's not going to be super stressful to the body. But if we look at the days in a row from rest day to rest day, the first day, I would say it's a moderate intensity. Second day is high intensity. Third day is going to be probably high intensity, like maybe high moderate. Fourth day, high moderate. Fifth day is like low intensity. And then the last day before the rest period is back to high intensity. So there's a little bit of blend in there. So they might be able to get away with it if on their arm exercises they really pick isolative movements and try not to go too crazy with them being compound. So for example, if I'm training this is like chest and shoulders is right into a day of back and shoulders, right into a day of arms. So you just did a bunch of chest presses and overhead presses. Then you do a bunch of back work, which is pulls, pull-ups, rows, that kind of stuff. And then you have arms. Like on that arm day, you definitely want to be doing isolative work. You do not need to be doing really heavy compound movements. So when I'm thinking about like tricep exercises, I'm not going to pick weighted dips. Because this is the third upper body day in a row, and 48 hours ago I was doing chest press and shoulder press. So I don't need weighted dips on my triceps 48 hours later. I need isolation exercises. So as long as their arm movements are going to be very isolative, lower weight loads, they're not going to have much of a problem. You could consider their rest day being full rest. You can consider the arm and calf day, if they do pure isolative movements, to be very low hit on the central nervous system. So that's actually pretty good. So they're going to have 2 days where the nervous system doesn't get hit too badly. 1 day is a rest day, so no bad at all there. And then that means they have 5 pretty aggressive days. This is on the edge of doable. So if their food is on point, if they're controlling and paying attention to their sleep quality, their stress management, then yes, they can probably get away with this and do okay. So good for them. They're like skirting on the edge, kind of that thing. Now what you'll see is there's a lot of difference in training frequency that is seen in like professional bodybuilders. Like they'll train crazy intense and they seem to do that 6 to 7 days a week, but they're on a lot of anabolic steroids. So they're taking testosterone above normal physiological levels. They're probably taking a lot of other things that help as well. They also take like their rest days and they do extensive recovery work like massage therapy, cryotherapy, and a bunch of other things. They might be taking a bunch of different like peptides, growth hormone, a whole bunch of stuff that aids in their recovery, so therefore they can train to higher volumes and greater frequencies. If you're not at above normal physiological levels of testosterone, you're not taking growth hormone, you don't have there's different drugs like DECA that helps to protect the joints. If you don't have all of that and you're not doing massage therapy every week, you're not doing cryotherapy every week, you probably don't want to train to the same intensity and volume that you see professional bodybuilders. So it's very important to recognize that the majority of drugs that bodybuilders use are to aid recovery. Again, why that makes 100% sense when we realize that when we recover is when we grow, right? So we said when you're out of the gym is when you're growing. So a lot of their drugs, a lot of their therapies are focused outside of the gym. So how do I get the best protein synthesis, like best conversion from food to muscle tissue? How do I keep my metabolism running at like the maximal speed? How can I make sure that all of my physiological blood work levels, all those things are optimal, not just within normal physiological ranges and sometimes exceeding normal physiological ranges, but how do I get them optimal? So you have to be a little careful when you look at examples of professionals because they're doing a lot of stuff that you will not be able to do, and therefore you shouldn't be doing what they do, if that makes sense. Okay, so Overall, I actually really like the structure. I think they balanced everything pretty well. I would just have them watch and see, how do your joints feel in weeks 3 and 4. If you start to feel a little fatigued, a little sore coming into the workouts, and this is what they made a note of, they said we'll add or remove volume throughout the weeks based on soreness. Bam, perfect. So if they go into a workout and they're like, man, my elbows are bugging me, I'm going to take a working set off of all exercises on this day. So instead of 3 working sets, I'm going to 2 working sets, and maybe I'll swap out my heaviest movements for some lighter movements. So if I do have weighted dips in there, maybe I'll just do a tricep press down instead. So you would want to make small modifications if you start to have joint pain or start to feel like delayed recovery between the training. You also want to make sure your nutrition is on point. So how we can help you with this is if you go to our website, if you go to Free Nutrition Education, the first thing on that page is create your own nutrition program. It's a document that you can view and or print. It contains the podcast 1232 that you want to listen to, and it tells you step by step how to create your own nutrition program. So it's free. You can go to our website, Free Nutrition Education, click on that document, and you can actually write your own nutrition program. I'm not joking. There's no catch to it. Literally, I just want people to eat better. So it's totally for free. Now, am I putting myself out of business? No, because people do have questions, and they'll maybe hire me to help sort it out, kind of figure out how to blend it into their lifestyle, how do they fit it into their schedule. There's personalization aspects that sometimes people have questions with. So I'm always happy to help with that, and that's what I do. But I do want people to be able to eat healthy and not have to pay a dime. So it's totally free on our website. We also have training education. So we have a lot of videos that I've made. I need to get back to making them. I haven't made one since January. But a lot of training education videos. You can see me go through workouts and I explain kind of what I'm doing. We also have free program examples. Like right now we're featuring a highlight of one of my international elite level powerlifters. Has a 500 plus DOT score, almost 10 times body weight total. He just squatted 505 at 148 pounds. Really freaking strong. And we have his current this month program for free. You can print it and check it out. We have a couple other free programs as well, like female fat loss, shaping, and mobility. We have a male bodybuilder, how he was rehabbing after a car crash. It's kind of cool to see. We have a female bodybuilder with high volume to promote fat loss. Female where it combines powerlifting and marathon running. So we have some free programs there. And then we also have our live monthly programming service, which is a subscription service, just $50 a month. You get brand new programs every 4 weeks. Every exercise has a video tutorial, and you can pick off of program topics of powerlifting, female shape development, pure bodybuilding, functional athleticism, functional longevity. So those are our topics. You can pick any one of those. You get brand new program every 4 weeks, and you get unlimited Q&A. You can ask me anything you want, and I will answer it 24/7. So it's an amazing resource in the sense that you get great programming that's brand new every 4 weeks, and you get education. You can ask me anything you want ever for only $50 a month. Pretty freaking awesome. So that's how we can help you through what services we have. So I appreciate you listening to today's podcast. I hope that you got a lot of food for thought, and I hope you also feel supported from us if you were to need anything or want anything. You can always reach out if you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything that you want to know. My email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. If you like our podcast, please share it. The more people we share it with, the more people can help. That's the whole point of the podcast, is just to help the world be a healthier, happier place. And I hope that this podcast is contributing towards that. Thank you to those who donate to support the podcast. There is a high hosting cost every year to get it on all the different platforms that we can get it on. So I appreciate the donations as they help cover some of that cost. You can donate on our website, www.brutalirongym.com. Even just $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever you can give. It's greatly appreciated. It all goes directly to the cost so we can keep this up and running. If you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.